normal people become terrified of criminals.
Shots were just fired. Police just came out and told us, and we're headed there right now.
They become terrified of their own government.
We have this from the Financial Review. Gen Z could be the most conservative generation ever. They go out less, have less sex, and lose their virginity later. What is up with young people and teenagers? And there's a couple questions about what this really means. So let me break it down for you very simply. First, the most conservative doesn't mean that Gen Z as a monolith believes certain things. It could be that 30% are super far left, but 31% are super conservative. And then people in the middle are whatever. So now it's the most conservative. But what I think this actually means is you have to, when you're talking about conservative versus progressive, you have to look at the relativity of the previous generations. If you took someone from 1650 and compared them to Joe Biden looks progressive as they come, despite the fact that he's an old man. Or more importantly, like Chuck Grassley. Like take like an actual Republican who's considered a conservative, compare him to a dude from the 1600s, and you're going to be like, the guy from the 1600s is backwards and, you know, super far right or whatever, however you describe it. So when we're asking whether or not someone's conservative, the question is, are they more traditional or less traditional by the previous generation standards? And the argument being made here is that Gen Z is less traditional than the previous generation standards, indicating they've shifted back towards traditional values in a way we have not seen in 100 years. We saw this data back in 2018. We are seeing it repeated over and over and over again. That suggests while Gen Z probably has similar politics to millennials, the fact that on certain areas they've moved more traditional, more conservative, this suggests Gen Z is actually the most conservative by movement, not by politics. I want to make sure that's clear. We are not saying that a 20-year-old has the same politics as Chuck Grassley. We're saying that a 20-year-old has more conservative views than a 35-year-old.
To throw a wrench in this, this is they go out less, have less sex, and lose their virginity later. I'm sorry to tell you guys, the economy, the inflation, people cannot afford to go out, and because of Tinder and crap, one wealthy guy's getting like 10 women, so those girls aren't around to have sex with anymore for those kids, those guys, those humans.
Right. And that is a good point based on that statement.
Yeah.
But when you also look at what we brought up previously, that Gen Z actually is aligned with boomers on the question of same-sex marriage, and the support for same-sex marriage has declined. That actually suggests politically Gen Z is more conservative. And I think this may be due to liberals abort their kids.
And about internet, just like ideas spread like wildfire with internet, so do conservative ideas.
Oh, you know what's crazy? And I was just thinking, I bet liberals get pregnant way more than conservatives do.
It's totally possible.
I think absolutely true. If conservatives,
if they got pregnant 3 times as much but had twice as many abortions,
boom.
Or twice as much but twice as many abortions.
Look at the point they're making about having less sex means you're conservative. Conservatives, and especially Christian conservatives, very religious people, are waiting until marriage, meaning substantially less sex and pregnancies. But then they have those kids. Whereas liberals, they bang like crazy, more power to you, but then they get tons of abortions.
There's actually some new trends that are troubling that I've seen that show that the teens are just having less sex. It's not because it's like the rise of the incels, right? Like they watch porn instead of having sex. And I think there's a real, in Japan, parents hire like strippers and sex counselors for their young sons because they don't pursue women. They view their computers as their sexual gratification.
It's happening everywhere, though. Did you see Kim Jong-un crying?
No.
Kim Jong-un cried, begging the women of North Korea to have more babies.
Wow.
And I'm like, wait, North Korea? Like, they don't have the internet there. How are they having less kids there, of all places? They aren't subject to the same social pressures as the Western countries are.
What do you think causes baby boom? My theory is that it's an optimism in the future, right? So like the big baby boom we had, all these guys came back from winning the war in World War II. There's a huge baby boom. I think we have a different problem now. I think that there's a real pessimism in the future, and there's like a malaise that has taken over this country, and that's why you're seeing decreased fertility rates. Because I have a lot of friends that haven't had kids yet, aren't married, And their number one thing is, I don't want to bring a kid in this world. It's so crazy. And that's always stuck with me because I'm going the exact opposite route. I'm like, no, I need more. I need more kids to change the world.
I strongly feel like I'm not bringing kids into the world because the world is terrible. I feel like that's a cope.
It's a cope.
It is.
I really don't think that's true.
And I don't believe the economy stuff either. We have, I've mentioned this, 8 casinos within 2 hours drive from where we are right now. These places can't exist. People are dumping money. And some people say, well, it's credit or it's irresponsible. I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. Either way, people are choosing to use what money they have on other things. It's often said people are always like, we're waiting for the right time to have kids. There is no right time.
No right.
That's a myth.
It never gets easier, by the way. It gets harder. So I'm 37. We had number 6 when I was 36. It was tough. You're more tired. You don't have the energy that you have when you're 23 or 19. I had my first at 19. Tons of energy. I mean, it was still tough and challenging, but it's gotten harder and harder and more difficult. Yeah, I can afford it more, but it is way more taxing on your energy levels and stress.
We got Americans are morbidly obese, so it's not food. So what is it? It is interesting. And remove it from the United States and look at North Korea. North Korea's having population problems, and we assume that they're starving. But clearly food is not the issue when Kim Jong-un cries and begs his women to have more babies.
It might be like weird. A collective consciousness thing. This is a bit out there, woo-woo, you would say. But I do think there's something to the collective consciousness when like 9 people feel good and then the 10th guy walks in the room, he might start feeling good too just because he can feel the energy. Like that's global. That's in the Schumann resonance in the Earth's magnetic field. I think that there's some sort of communication. But like I went through when I was 26 with this one girl. We were talking about. I was like, yeah, I don't want to have kids because what you were saying, Terry. I don't want to bring them into this crap hellhole. But I knew that was kind of fake. We were saying it out loud, but in my head I was like, it's not really true though. But I did say I don't want to travel all over the world. Like my job's traveling. A lot of it is. It has been throughout the years, and I didn't want to leave them behind when I went and traveled. And I don't want to be that dad that wasn't around like 4 days a week because I wanted to tour. I wanted to go tour, and I never ended up really touring. But I still want to go tour when I want to tour. But I don't know. It doesn't. But then the loneliness of just getting on my computer and being like, what, another one of these days? Like, there's more to life.
How is it? I think it's just really interesting that North Korea is experiencing this. They rule. They control culture with an iron fist. So it is interesting to see that it's happening all over the place.
You know, Russia did this huge experiment in the 1920s to abolish the family, and they were too successful, where they ended up having to reverse course because people weren't having kids anymore. So what they did was I forget the term for it, but they like basically honored mothers. Like if you were a mother of X amount of kids, you were given like the ultimate worker title, and it was like the most glorious and venerated position in the country. And they ended up having to do a lot to reverse it. I think Americans kind of chose it though. In the Soviet Union, they liberalized everything they did. They made marriage a 5-minute dissolution process. Yep. They made you raise your kids away from the home. That you couldn't even have your grandma.
It's all happening now.
It's happening. But Americans like actively chose it, right? Like we now are doing this whole women's lib thing, which I don't really care if women work, but like. Why do you want, you're going to work for someone, right? You're going to serve someone. Why not your family? Why not your kids? Like, why do you want to work for Jeff Bezos over these little human beings that absolutely love you and will do anything to get your affection and love?
I can simplify it dramatically. Why would a woman choose to enter a pickle jar opening contest against a man? And I'm being as silly and absurd with it as possible. The joke being, of course, women can't open pickle jars. Some women, of course, can. My point is, yeah, men and women are different. And men do a lot of jobs that women would not want to do, specifically due to physical differences. Like carrying bodies out of burning buildings is a job for a man. Why? Sorry, dude. There are some women who can do it. But on average, overwhelmingly, it's going to be a guy who can lift a body and pull them to safety out of a burning building. Why did society decide women should start competing with men in their role? That led to a massive decline in birth rates.
Well, look, I don't think I had that unique of an experience, but my great-grandmother, so I'm the eldest of an eldest of an eldest, so I knew my great-grandmother was 60 when I was born. She was the matriarch Like, no one messed with her. She was the boss. Like, you didn't want to be on her bad side. You couldn't really fool her. I never really grew up with this mindset that, like, women were inferior to men. Like, it was never even a thing. I actually always thought that, like, I don't want to make grandma mad. I don't want to make my mom mad. I don't want to make, it was just always. But so, like, in my mind, women have always been elevated in our family. And I don't think that that's that strange for most of America. I think most people would defer and do what their great grandmother said or what their mother said. And so you have this weird thing where women started fighting for equality when they had the whole world. That someone tweeted, I forget who it was, but it might have been Peachy Keenan, who I'm a huge fan of. But she said the problem is that when you proclaim that women can do anything, they end up doing everything. They're the breadwinner and the homemaker. You spend less time with your kids. You spend the weekends doing all your chores and catching up on everything. And I don't know, women were elevated in society, and they were, I don't know. It's puzzling.
The end result is simple. The people who have kids, their ideals will persist, their genetics will persist, and the people who don't won't. It's just that simple.
Well, you were talking about Roe v. Wade earlier, and how, and I think you're exactly right. Like the real issue with Roe v. Wade is it didn't allow the states to experiment. We didn't get to see how different abortion limits in different states and what that would produce. Everyone had legalized abortion up until the moment of birth, and that was that. And so now we actually have a situation where we can see that the results of being a pro-life state and how that is more beneficial to your
32.
your society.
I think the report was 32,000 births attributed to the overturning of Roe v. Wade.
That's huge.
That ain't happening in blue states.
No.
So if we actually see population decline reverse in red states due to actual human reproduction, blue states will still keep declining. And then they can bring in all the non-citizens they want to shore up their numbers. But all that matters is, do human beings have access to abortion? Yes, no. If you don't, you're going to have way more kids. That's just it. Basic math. Y'all can make every argument to factor in every variable, but still the overwhelming mass is going to be people in California. They may increase their population every year by 100,000 per se, but they're not having kids. Mm-hmm. So it still will just be people aging and then passing on, and then they've got to keep, at the bare minimum, they're just maintaining themselves on a treadmill.
What if the illegal migrants have the kids?
They also can have abortions too. Nothing's barring illegal immigrants from having abortions.
They don't seem, I don't know, this is a generalization, but in Mexico, for instance, it's much more culturally acceptable to have large families and lots of kids.
Planned Parenthoods tend to be in minority neighborhoods.
And they target them mercilessly with advertising and PR. It's crazy.
You may be right. And I have considered this, that a different culture, and we're not just talking about Mexico. It's not, these illegal immigrants come from all over the world. Many of them are coming from South and Central America. They may be more religious and less likely to get abortions, but that doesn't change the pressure system that exists where you mentioned they're being targeted. You've got South Park did that funny joke where Cartman is a teacher and he's telling all the Latina girls to get abortions and the black girls. He's like, just cheat, just get rid of the baby and you can be rich. Do it like what white people do. But white conservatives are having kids.
Well, here's the question then. You mentioned earlier the Soviet Union had given women like special benefits for having kids. And I've heard like some countries lower tax burden up to like 100%. If you have 4 kids, you don't have to pay any taxes at all. So would there be any value to doing that for women that are illegal immigrants in the United States?
I just don't. I think as a matter of rules, you can't give benefits to illegal immigrants. You can't do any incentives for illegal immigration. They're breaking the law. We have to control our border. But I do think that we have to do this for moms in America, right? My wife works so hard, and I don't know how she does it half the time, but it's almost like society looks down on moms, right? Like, you're a stay-at-home mom. Oh, yeah, that's way harder than your joke of a job sending press releases out for Google, right? Like as some low-level person, like, being a mom is a tough job, and it's the most important job. In what world will you ever have little, the people underneath you looking up to you like children do to their mothers, right? Like, you will never get that in the workplace. You die, you start a successful business and you die, you are forgotten like immediately. They move on, they find a replacement. You don't do that with your mom. You don't do that with your dad, as long as they're good. You know what I mean? But like, I don't know. I'm kind of ranting now, but
I don't understand the misogyny in general, where it's coming from or why. I mean, maybe it's just I wasn't around it growing up because I had, similar to you, like a
Feminist.
phenomenal mother. Like, or the family was so legit, and she was like, if she said it, it happened. Like, there was no denying her authority.
that was your experience too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's coming from feminists. Feminists want to. So you get feminists who want to be in masculine roles, and so they attack and attack and attack the feminine role. And now we live in a society where the feminine role is looked down upon. It's insulted. And they argue that they're fighting for women.
I think that at the root of all of these people, these activists that are doing this, I don't think they came from happy households, right? And so what they grew up with, they end up spreading to everyone else, and they cause chaos and dysfunction for all of us. And it's like a cancer; it keeps spreading. And I mean, I don't know. The women in my family ruled the roost. And you know what? If my wife were to say, like, you're not doing this, guess what I'm not doing, right? Like, I defer to my wife on everything. She lets me lead most of the time, but at the end of the day, they make the rules. And if they come down hard on something, you're not doing it. It's not happening.
When I started making internet videos in 2006, and I was like 26 years old. And there was this girl, I was like, maybe I'll start a family with this girl. And then I was like, what would my life be like for the next 15 years? I'll just be making internet videos of like me with my kids. What value is that going to bring to society? And now I realize, it'll show people how to have a happy and healthy family.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.